Okay, welcome everybody. So excited to introduce this next session. Obviously, you're here because this is all about the Good Business Festival, and the Good Business Festival is happening in two parts. We've got part one now, which is online, and then part two, hopefully, maybe a bit online, maybe mainly in person. That's the plan. Come the spring. And the whole idea of the Good Business Festival is that we celebrate how business can do good, and we celebrate how business can change the world for the better. And it hasn't always been like that. Many of the problems we see in the world today are as a result of poor business practice, but it's the only thing. Business and enterprise is the only thing that can put these things straight as well. So we're here to celebrate how by realigning business we can actually do some really good. So this is Act 1. Act 2 is later in the year, and we've got an amazing range of speakers or people to attend this next session. And the whole point of today is that we're linking global with local. So the whole idea is that global events have real local context, and local responses can shape global events, and that's what we're trying to do today. And the next session is Profit from Purpose. Doing good doesn't mean you have to do it for free. If you're not making profit, then you're not a business, right? So there's this whole kind of contradiction that we feel around, oh, it's not for profit. There's nothing wrong with profit, but let's do something really good with that profit. So that's what we're after. And we've got four incredible people to sit on the panel to have a discussion with. I'm going to introduce them all, give you a tiny little sentence on each, and then I'm going to get them to talk about themselves and what they do for 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 minutes. I'm rubbish at timekeeping, which means I've probably got the wrong job. Okay, so the first person we've got is Pablo Handel. Pablo is from Sao Paulo, and he co-founded Impact Hub Sao Paulo in 2006, and is an invested board member of Impact Hub Florianopolis, Manaus, and Belo Horizonte. I hope all those are pronounced roughly right, Pablo. He studied business administration, theatre, pedagogy, and it actually says meditation of conflicts, but I think that might be mediation of conflicts. Actually, do you know what? I'll take either of those things. In Austria, and has worked in India and the Netherlands, where he served as a strategist and designer of development processes. That I'm already wanting to hear all about this, right? So that's the first person. The second person is Davy Clark, and Davy is from London, and she is the managing director of Impact Hub King's Cross, part of a global network of over 100 impact hubs. She grew the King's Cross Impact Hub business support activity 5-fold. I'm going to say that again, 5-fold. That's 500% when she arrived, working to ensure that ethics is at the heart of society and economy, and welcoming a radically inclusive community by supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs. Davy, welcome. Then we've got Fiona Shaw. I know Fiona well. She is amazing, genuinely. She's a writer, publisher, co-founder of sustainable business magazine Ethos. She works with clients in the UK and Liverpool and way beyond on social value-driven projects, and is currently studying for an MBA in responsible business at Berlin Steinbeis University. And then we have Ekaterina Kaletskaya-ish. Thank you. Katerina was on a panel earlier, and I'm really looking forward to hearing her speak again. She co-founded Impact Hub Moscow in 2014, and having studied innovative business practices and social entrepreneurship in Europe, Asia, and the USA. Impact Hub Moscow is a business incubator, innovation lab, and a community of impact makers aimed at creating tangible solutions to the most pressing world's issues. In partnership with foundations and corporations over the last 6 years, it has supported the development of nearly 300 social enterprises across Russia. All of you, amazing, welcome. I'm so delighted to introduce you. And I'm going to get you each to talk for maybe 2, 3, however long you want really, minutes about what you do, or who you are, what you do, and why you matter, why you matter personally. And we're going to go first with Pablo.
Mark and everyone, it's first of all, it's humbling to be among such wonderful people, and it's a privilege to be here. I think My story comes back. It's very, very early days. I think when it really struck me that I want to dedicate my professional, I guess, career slash life to something that's meaningful. I joined the University of Austria, the Business University. I joined an organization called ISEC, and sort of like this organization that kind of very early days said, okay, we're here to actually develop change agent. That was kind of like, oh, that sounds cool. But I think it is really only today that I really understand that this ambition actually is fairly deep in its sense that I think it's kind of like a never-ending ambition. And even though I think in the beginning I kind of joined because it was like a cool club and it was great people and the university was huge and I needed a community, I think along my story I really understood that that there's a career behind it. It's not just being part of a club. And so I thought university was always really, really bad. And I'm sorry for I'm not making any, kind of marketing for my university. But the reason why is because it would never really there was never really sort of a community of like, never ask you, what do you want to do with your life? And where is it anchored? And I think in ISEC, that question was always asked at least a couple of times a year. And very early, I felt like I needed to give some contribution back. I'm the son of political refugees from Argentina, from the dictatorship. I had the pleasure my parents survived. I grew up in Austria, very safe environment. And so I kind of have to give back. But very early on, and my father worked with indigenous, my mom worked with refugees, but I wanted to kind of go into like a business approach. I want to say, I don't want to be just, hopping from one project to the other. I really want to set up a business so that I can be my own boss and actually can decide where do we do and how do we do that. And so the question of profit really came only, I think, more in the recent years when I really felt like, okay, it's time now to sustain a family, send the kids to school and so on. The thing needs to make profit. But I think it gave me kind of like a 20-year kind of time to figure it out. And I think that's why figuring out this combination of doing the right thing, which you call doing good, and making profit. And it's interesting because I think it was always a matter of mental models. And I must confess, for a long time, I felt like, kind of really kind of guilty to kind of like make money out of it and so on. But I think as we develop hundreds of ventures in Brazil, it became really evident that the profit is a result of doing something that somebody really needs and doing it really well. And the rest is really sort of the details of management, I guess. And living in Brazil, there's an abundance of problems. I mean, I get out of the street and I see the first one. It's like, it's really about choosing which problem you want to solve because they're all in your face and they're all kind of needed to be catered to. So what we do basically is really look at the key issues that we see and try to find different solutions than they've been there. Like, government hasn't solved, NGOs haven't solved. So I think there's a huge gap of people just the smartest brains in Brazil just stopping to think that in order for them to have a career and sort of be financially healthy, they have to go into oil and gas industry, for example, right? Or into public servant industries. And so for me, it is about making an entire mind shift of a generation that comes out of instability, of inflation, of, hey, I need to earn a lot of money so I can survive, towards you can do your money if you need to, but you can actually also do it about feeling good about it, and not when you get to your 41, 42, feeling divided between, hey, okay, I have not this money, but what I'm going to do the rest of the 20 years, and kind of having this big question mark in front of your face. So I think why I matter, I think is because consistently for the last 20 years, me and actually my co-founders and my investors and my team, and it's not about me only, have kind of paved a path to make it easy for more people, kind of just like have it smoother and say, hey, there's an archetype. It's called doing the right thing and doing enough money. And there's been people who have done it before. So now it should be easier, right? And they look good, they look healthy, they look happy. So, we are role models just because who we are and what we do. And so we need to be aware of that. And I think just standing up for that and just mentoring people who want to go that career path. And I'm calling it not a vocation for a specific reason. I want to call it a career, because I want to compete with the careers that people think, okay, I want to become an engineer. That's great. So why don't you become a social entrepreneur or social business owner? Why don't you become a social billionaire? What's the problem with becoming rich? I want you to be rich, so that you can create an entire value chain of wealthy, healthy, sustainable individuals and families and communities. And I think profit is really there just for people to prosper together.
Those businesses with a purpose always outperform those without. And career means two things. It means a sequential step up a ladder in employment, and it can mean zigging and zagging out of control. I embrace both of those things. But the whole idea of placing sustainability at the heart of enterprise, Pablo, that's brilliant. That's exactly where we should go completely. Love that. Thank you, my friend. That was really succinctly and beautifully put. I appreciate that. And next up, Vavi, if I let you, if we can just pin your video, that'd be amazing.
How do I pin my video?
No, you're done. You're good.
I don't have to. Fine. Great. So thank you, Pablo, for that introduction. I wonder if there's something about having a refugee heritage, because my mum and grandfather was also refugees from Sri Lanka. The reason they were is because my grandfather was a radical journalist who said things that got him into trouble. And so I've kind of, all my life, I've had a sense that it was necessary. It was like part of my identity to try and make a difference to the world. And there were various ways to do that. And I was, I spent a long time kind of exploring and being a bit lost and careering around in the wobbling about sense. But there came a point in my life where I decided that my touchstone became, what I want to do is help other people do what they want to do. And I ended up training as a careers advisor, and from there ended up supporting refugees and asylum seekers, first of all, to find jobs, but also to start businesses. And in that, I ended up doing business support, and in that, I ended up with more and more in social enterprise. And what I've really learned about myself is that there are a number of things that I like that doing social enterprise brings together. There's a powerful sense of self-determination, of sense that you can take that purpose and make something happen that you care about. But simultaneously, it doesn't have to be individualistic. It can be individually motivated in a way, but it's also really collective. Now, a number of us on this call are from the Impact Hub Network. And one of the things I absolutely love about the Impact Hub Network is that we combine that. We have this phrase, locally rooted, globally connected. So we bring what we know in our local areas and our insights and our local concerns, but we share learning, we do some of our programs together, business support together. Every time I get together with these guys and many more, there are 100 hubs now around the network, I realize that there's so much more to learn. So that combination of knowing stuff and sharing stuff, being self-motivated but being collectively motivated, doing what you care about but doing what the world cares about, and I think inherent in that is that doing good and doing it in a way that's sustainable. Now, there are some things that profit can't do. There are some things that will never be profitable. There is a place for public sector. There is a place for charitable sector. But there are some things that business is really good at, really excellent at. And let's harness that. Let's make it so that business is adding and not taking away. I find that so motivating, and I'm surrounded by people who do more and more and more of that. And guess what? I get to play in all their businesses, stick my fingers in, mess about a bit. They think I'm being really helpful, but they have to do the work, and I just sit there and say a few wise words, and they go off and have to make it happen. And it's just so fun and so multiple. Together we multiply the effectiveness of what we all do. It's wonderful.
I love that idea. There's so much you said there, Vavi, that really fills me with joy. So we multiply each other rather than just additional. I completely get that. I love the fact that you're part of your, I want to find out about your granddad, but that's a conversation for another day. Part of my identity is to make a difference. That's really, really interesting. We can maybe talk about that later. And the thing I like the most was you said, you drew the distinction between knowing stuff and sharing stuff, and how both are important. And there are many people that know stuff who, in my experience, haven't shared stuff. And it's the first one is only powerful when added to the second one. I love that. Thank you. That was really inspiring. Two great kickoffs there. Thank you so much. Okay, so next up we got Fiona. Can we add Fiona to our wall of miscreants? That'd be brilliant. Thank you. So Fiona, tell me about yourself, what you do and why you matter. Oh, you're on mute.
There's that Zoom t-shirt again. So my name's Fiona and I'm now on the wall of miscreants. I am based in Liverpool and am the founder of a small business here called Wordscape, and we mainly work, we're a creative and publishing agency. I mean, we mainly work with grassroots businesses and social economy businesses, but actually, you know, a real cross-section of businesses to kind of help them explain what they do, to tell their stories, to kind of really get to the essence of what they do so that they can communicate it, I guess, to clients, to customers, for funding bids, to people they work with and that sort of thing. And as part of that, we are also the publishers of Ethos magazine. So we are your co-hosts today, which we started about 5 years ago. And as Mark said in his introduction at the beginning, that's a responsible and sustainable business magazine. And I guess the origins of that come from my first job when I left university. You know, as Pablo was saying earlier, university doesn't necessarily kind of line you up for what you want to do in life. But I liked writing and I knew that I wanted to do that. And Liverpool didn't have a whole lot of options on that front. So I became a business journalist because it was kind of the only gig in town. But it was at a time in the late 90s and it was kind of getting into sort of, you know, the apprentice style business, and it was all very middle-aged men in grey suits. It was all quite aggressive. It was very, it's about money, and it was about gearing, and it was really heavily about profit. And I did it because I learned a lot of skills around that. And I think one of the interesting things about journalism is that obviously you get to write, but actually you get to listen a lot and you get to talk to a lot of people and hear a lot of experiences and listen to those stories. And I was always really frustrated by this sense of business as something that was other, and it was kind of separate from our day-to-day lives. And that's where Ethos came from, really. You know, it was doing something to get people to understand that, you know, your money is power and you have a choice about where you spend it. And some businesses are doing those things better than others. And that, you know, it's integral to our day-to-day lives, whether it's what you wear or what you eat or where you live, you know, where you go out. Every single thing about our lives really is business. So, you know, we worked kind of on that sense of bringing those things together. And Mark, you know, you were asking then about why I matter. And actually, it's funny, it's something that Thebe said too, but, you know, I don't have a superpower that makes me matter, but the thing that I can do, and the thing that we do with clients and with the magazine, is we have that ability to kind of amplify their stories, you know, to draw people's attention to them, to kind of, to support them, to bring together these different strands of things that we know that are happening, you know, that all exist in the same world, and to tell other people about them. So we do that kind of in our agency life, but we definitely do that through the magazine too.
But Fiona, that is a superpower. that is, look, Ethos is one of my favorite reads. It's always beautifully produced and has the most amazing contributors. So it is a superpower, and what you do, I think what you do matters. I really do.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a privilege. What can I say?
Brilliant, thank you. And I love that idea of not knowing what you wanted to do when you left uni, and how actually it to go back to Pablo's point, how it actually builds us for nothing, really. My eldest daughter and her husband, they both got first, one in chemistry, one in fine art, not respectively, the other way around, and neither of them are using their degrees, but they're probably got 80 grand's worth of debt each. You know, there's a whole load of, I know that's what's London, isn't it? Over at London, in London. So so the way we educate and what we educate for, maybe we can talk about this in a minute actually, that's changing massively and radically. Thank you for that. And last but not least, we've got Ekaterina, who's going to join us on the wall of cheekiness. Okay, over to you.
Hi everyone again. I'm glad to be on this panel. And I guess I already shared a bit of my story. Currently, I'm leading Impact Hub Moscow as some of my colleagues. I'm from this network where we are helping, we in Moscow are helping particularly young social entrepreneurs who are making their first steps in this field. And I think my whole journey so far has been how to match a purpose and profit. Similar to Pablo, in my student years, I was a part of ISEC and traveled the world with this organization, led a few projects, and so experienced, I saw how difficult problems can influence people's lives in communities like in countries like Pakistan, in Oman, in the Middle East. And I saw how young people are trying to invent projects to support, to influence the conditions in their countries, and how they always were they needed constant funding to keep these projects going. So at that point, the idea came to me that there must be a solution for sustainable non-profit work. And when social entrepreneurship became a trend, and actually when in Russia, social entrepreneurship only was an emerging field, then we decided to create an impact hub that would help those people to really go into this as a career, probably, you know, to start the businesses and with the social purpose and make them sustainable. And so I guess my purpose is help entrepreneurs to get more and more resources for their work through donors, through impact investors, through their own business model that can make them sustainable. And together with the team, we are looking for various ways, instruments, how to enlarge those resources for these entrepreneurs.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I mean, we spoke briefly earlier, but not everybody will have heard that one. So I really appreciate you coming back on this evening. Just a quick question. How do you, I mean, all the work that you do is around social impact, positive social impact. How do you decide what is a positive social impact and whether it's positive enough? How do you measure that within the work that you do?
It's a very good question, and we often debate about it with the colleagues. We look, first of all, to the target audience that the project has, and whether this target audience is a low-income population or people with special needs. So to what extent the target audience needs support. And then we look at how they can measure their work, how they can manage impact and how they can measure it, at least with simple steps and not necessarily with huge reports, but how can they show that their beneficiaries are really changing lives.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. And the work you've done is incredible. We talked earlier about it. People can go back and watch that one again. So look, they are our panelists, our miscreants, our change makers, our revolutionaries, and I'm massively thrilled to have you here. But look, before we dig into some questions, and please, anyone watching, if you type questions into the chat box, then they will get sent out. I can see them anyway, but you can talk directly through that chat box with our attendees. So I'm really interested first. We talk about purpose-driven businesses. What is a purpose? What does it mean to to have a purpose? What does that mean? And I'll start first. I'll start first with Davy, actually. What does that mean to have a purpose?
That's a really great question. And of course, it means something different for each person. So I think one of the things about purpose is it is personal, but I think there has to be a sense of benefit to other people or the world. And it's as simple as that. It's simple and complicated. All these things are simple and complicated. And there's often a lot of navel gazing about what's the definition of a social enterprise. And there are some very formal definitions, and they'll be different in every country. And in some countries, we know that social enterprise as a term is not used a lot, and people assume that it's charity or an NGO. And in some countries it's used a lot, but there's a very fixed idea of what it is. In the UK, often people mean something which has what's called an asset lock. In other words, at least 51% of the value of the business has to be legally plowed back into the social purpose. Personally, our own definition at Impact Hub King's Cross is much broader than that. We basically say anyone, we have a sense that if somebody wants to do good, we'll work with them. We're very kind of open to exploring what that looks like. But the purpose is usually social or environmentally based, sometimes both. I'd love to give a couple of examples of ones that I just think are really beautiful and clever in the way they do things. And also to show how they can have really interesting ongoing knock-on effects in ways that other sectors can't. So the first example I wanted to give was a business called Fat Macy's, which is a catering business. They do supper clubs, and in the lockdown they did food deliveries, and they partner with a homelessness hostel. And one of the things they noticed that was a problem for the people living in the hostel was that if they earned any money, they would lose benefits. And so that meant they could never build up savings in order to get a deposit for a flat. So you were trapped in this cycle. So they came up with this really clever mechanism. I think this is genius. They would train people in in front of house, back of house, and they would get them to volunteer for 150 hours. And for each hour they volunteered, they put £10 into a completely separate charitable trust. Once you've worked for 150 hours and you have a lot of training and experience, then you're very employable, but also you're allowed to apply from that trust for a grant, which is unrelated to the amount of money that's gone in, kind of related to your volunteering. It could be a larger amount or a small amount, for your first month's rent and your deposit. And so you've completely bypassed the benefit trap. You've got somebody with work skills, you've got them a house, and it's a social enterprise mechanism. It's just so clever, totally purpose-driven, completely focused on really understanding what the problem was, insight into what the needs of that target group was, and building a really imaginative business model that would resolve it.
That's brilliant. I love that. I absolutely love that. And Pablo, what about for you? What is a purpose? What does it mean to have a purpose?
I come from an understanding that we use the word purpose because when we say that you're not purpose-driven organization, that we all have a purpose. All businesses have a purpose by definition. Like, the difference is that some of them have the purpose to just make money. That's it. And some of them say, besides making money, the reason I'm here is because I want to solve a problem. And I'm gonna be anchored in that. That's my basic point of departure of that journey. Especially when you look at, let's say, a more entrepreneurial approach where somebody really sort of starts thinking that from scratch and building something from scratch. So that motivation is essential, and it needs to be very clear to yourself and to all the partners and investors. And it can be from my purpose. an example of my purpose is to dignify housing in Brazil, right? How many people live in undignified housing conditions? And there's an entire value chain and business chain around that being developed in the recent years. And I'm sort of part of that indirectly of that project. But what I want to say about that is that the business needs to have a why, an answer to that why. Why are you doing what you do? And even though maybe you're going to encounter problems and you're going to encounter maybe failure and you're going to encounter loss, if you know why you're doing that, this is going to, one, take you further in the journey because you have a good reason for that. Two, is going to attract more investors, more collaborators, and it creates clarity why you're here, right? It gives you a reason to stand here. And profit, of course, should be a consequence, right? Because if you're doing what you're doing, if your purpose is being sort of translated into sort of products and services, then you should be profitable at some point in your journey.
Lovely. Yeah, absolutely. There's no problem with profit. It's where it goes that's the issue. Ekaterina, what about for you? What does to have a purpose mean for you?
I agree with Davy and Pablo, and that it's also starts with why, and then it comes to what does the person want to do beyond herself or himself. So what is the larger cause for the existence? And similar to business purpose, what is the larger cause beyond providing a product or a service or employing people? So what is it that is going to change after some time?
I love that. I love the idea of having a larger cause. I mean, it's very clear, isn't it? So even though you may, I don't know, design buildings, I've designed houses for a couple of housing companies now, and the whole idea of yes, that's fine, and that'll give somebody a house, a roof over their head, but it'll also obviously have an environmental impact. So building that in a sustainable way, that's a really interesting purpose beyond the building of the house. I really get that. Thank you. And last but not least, Fiona, what is to have a purpose, or what does that mean to you?
So I think this is really interesting because I think we're actually potentially redefining what the word purpose means, because I think when we talk about purpose-driven businesses, then that's exactly the sort of thing that we're thinking about, a sort of a greater consideration of impact on community and environment and world. But I actually think that as humans, we all look for purpose in the things that we're doing, and it can be something really micro, paying your rent, doing something to pay your rent, or doing something to look after your family and support them can be totally your purpose. And I think, that for an awful lot of people it is, but I think it's something that, it's a fundamental need that we have as humans. I think in a business context, it's being redefined, as everybody said, to something which is more akin to a moral purpose, a greater purpose, which is usually kind of social or environmental. But I think, even if you'd have gone back 10 years tops, if you'd have talked to people about purpose, they wouldn't have said the same thing. And I think, when you talk about purpose-driven businesses, obviously we've got the sort of social economy, CIC, social enterprise type businesses, which are probably started with a specific purpose in mind. But I think the ones that are really interesting are the ones that have taken a bit of time to find their purpose. I think if you look at some of the businesses on our high streets at the moment, you might look at Iceland or Timpsons or people like that. You wouldn't necessarily say that they started out with a social purpose, but I think actually they've kind of evolved to a stage in their history now where they have got quite a strong sense of purpose. So yeah, I think it's interesting because I think it's a movable feast.
It's definitely changing, and I mean, Iceland are a fascinating business, full stop. From not having a social purpose to having one driven around organic food, and then being bought out and not having a social purpose, and now back with their positioning on plastic. They're really clear and really well led. Do you think you need a strong and clear leader to have a social purpose? This is general, rather than go around you all. Do you think leadership is really important here?
I mean, yeah, I think ultimately somebody's got to make that decision. And the thing with purpose is that everybody in the organisation has to buy into it too. And so that comes down to leadership, because you do obviously see examples where, you know, something started with a really strong sense of purpose, but that's been kind of communicated in slightly different ways. And that's when it kind of starts to split and people do different things. And you get that kind of sense of mission drift, I guess. So I think leadership is really fundamental. And I think, you know, Mark, you talk about Iceland there, you know, the thing that you can say with Iceland and with Timpsons and businesses like that is that it's from their leaders that they've really got that strong sense of this is what we do now and this is how we're going to do it.
And it's the lack of leadership that lost in that particular case when they sold the business to investors. They lost that mission, and it was only when they bought it back that it came back. Pablo, what about you? What do you think leadership's essential to having a strong, clear purpose?
Yeah, and I think leadership, yes, but I think for the last years, what I've seen is really vital stewardship. So I think there's a necessity for a group of people kind of stand for it in the beginning. But what you need ultimately, especially when you think in large organizations, right, and you grow, or even governments, you need people who actually translate that into something, whether that's principles, practices, operations, and that leader, it can't be everywhere. You cannot be everywhere. You can't manage maybe 20 people, and then you have to start developing stewards. And I think at the end of the day, if that leader goes away, but the organization still has the stewards, or that sort of organism still has stewards, and understanding stewards being people who really care and who say they kind of guard that sort of purpose and translate it into something very practical. And that's what I think that these organizations, leaders need to build stewards. And then I think then they can be sure that you really have the consistency that you need actually in your daily business, because you're gonna have to face difficult decisions, and you can't do that alone. You need some decision have to be made somewhere where the leader will never show up. Maybe in the factory, maybe on a farm. You don't know. But if you have stewards that actually are your ears and eyes and kind of are aligned with you, then I think you are. I think then you're there. At least your chances to succeed are larger. And so I want to go back from the sort of only leader-driven organization to really steward-driven organizations. I believe in that model.
I love that, Pablo. That's really there's a real sense there, because a leader on its own is not enough. So it's how you then build that culture across a business, and you use stewards. Davey, do you think there's maybe this is a personal thing that I feel. Do you think there's some kind of fatigue with everyone telling us they've got a purpose, with every business standing for something? Is there? I'm a little bit tired of it. Is that just me, or is that a wider thing?
I think I don't know. I mean, there may be some reactions to that, but personally, I think that my aspiration, my goal would be that every business has a purpose and is more additive than subtractive from the world. In which case, then your choices are, as they have been forever, what do you want to buy because you like it, right? Then that stops being an issue. And I always say that, you know, a lot of people will buy a product which is good once, and then they'll buy it again if they like it. You know, there's loads of coffee companies now that are social enterprises. There's, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But if you don't like the taste of the coffee, you know, you're going to go and buy Nescafe again if that's your preference. So, or McDonald's. You know, it's more important. You have to have both, and actually that's what's going to sell people in the longer term, is that it works for them. So, which is what also then goes with profit again. So, you know, are you giving them what they need? Are you solving the problem that they think they want solved, not what you'd like them to want? Because a lot of people who want to start businesses come up with, oh, I think people want this, and they're wrong. What do people actually want? What are they actually willing to spend real money on? And if you can combine that with purpose, then there's no issue.
So if everyone's got a purpose, that's not the problem, is it? That's not what I'm bored of. I'm tired of people telling me how purposeful their purpose really is, and that's
it doesn't. If it's preachy, it's no good.
yeah, it's that. I'm just kind of I'm bored of that. But maybe I've got a short span of attention. Ekaterina, so tell me about purpose with the businesses that you develop. So I was really interested in how you measure good. How you measure goods, one thing. Are you able to distinguish between those companies with a real purpose and those companies who are playing a game of saying they have a purpose in order to get on your program, or do you not have those kind of people at all?
Actually, we do. We do have during the competition time, since our programs are for free for entrepreneurs, but they do have to go through the competition. And often we see that how purely commercial ideas pretend that they have a social purpose, and they invent some social causes that they solve. But this is usually seen in their applications and how they talk about this social purpose. We even receive some very funny ideas, like some students want to do a place with shisha place, sorry, my English. I don't know the English word for this.
English as well. Yeah, it's like Turkish smoking thing.
And they're explaining that they're doing, they're creating a social space for students to connect, etc. So we do receive these ideas also. But of course, it's very difficult to define when a business, let's say it's a business that provides a platform where psychological services are delivered. Like anyone can go to the platform and find a psychologist and then talk in a messenger with the psychologists about their problems. So we had a business like this, and they said to us from the beginning that they are very interested in going into rural areas where psychologists are not so present as a profession. And so this was their social purpose. In here, we have to define whether it's so-called business in the social field, or it is a social business.
Yeah. Got that. Brilliant. Thank you. Really, really clear. Okay, so if every company's got a purpose, or every good company has a purpose, are we sure that having a purpose makes you more profitable? Are we certain that having a purpose is good for business? So do those businesses who have a purpose generally benefit in your experience? And we'll start where we left. We'll start with Ekaterina. So do businesses with a purpose tend to do better in Russia?
I think so, especially when we talk about starting entrepreneurs. If they have a social purpose, they get more attention from their clients. It is easier for them to create a community of people who support them. It is easier for them to go to find resources to start. I think it is really a benefit. For example, one lady that we just talked about before this conversation, Guzel Sanjapova, who is from Mali Tourish, and she helped her father develop a honey factory in the village of 20 people. So when she started, she engaged a very large community of people who supported her work exactly because of her purpose to really revitalize this village. And although she was a small business, very small business, competing with similar honey productions from all over the country, she drew so much attention to her cause and to her business because she was able to articulate it, and it is really genuine. She's doing a lot of things to help the villagers in that tiny place.
And the customer buys into that. The customer wants to see that growth.
Yes,
brilliant. Fiona, from your point of view, do businesses in general benefit from having a genuine purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the direction of travel now. I think, you know, generation, you know, my generation, generations younger than me, are demanding more. I think we have a much greater awareness now of the damage that we've done to, you know, not just the planet, but to kind of the social environments that we live in sometimes, through a perpetual sense of kind of growth and consumption. And I think that the more we have the ability to kind of access information, and the easier it is to get hold of information and know how businesses do things, how they operate, you know, what they've been up to, I think it does make it more and more important. You know, it's, as everybody I think has said so far, it's a way for businesses to differentiate themselves, and that is really key. I guess at the same time, you know, it's kind of a sense of being transparent. At the same time, you know, we're all sitting here talking about this because it's something that we're kind of interested in and we believe in, and so we're kind of probably sensitive to this sort of thing and pick up on it. You know, there will be stacks of people who don't. I keep going back to talk about Iceland, but I'm really interested in Iceland because they're doing things with packaging and because they're doing things with child poverty and all sorts of things. My dad likes Iceland because they round up the numbers on everything they sell and it's really easy. So I think, you know, it means different things to different people, but I think certainly from a generational point of view, I think that doing good, having a purpose, knowing what you stand for will sort of is the direction of travel for businesses now and in the future.
Brilliant, thank you. And then Pablo, so Brazil, how do purpose-driven businesses succeed or fail? Are they more successful? Is there something in it, genuinely in it for them? Are they better businesses?
So I think there's many answers to that. Maybe so one answer would be, don't do it if you think you're gonna be more profitable than a non-purpose driven organization. Do it because you believe in it. And don't do it when the environment is perfect, because yes, is our current government ideal? No way. Is it gonna change? Definitely. Everything will pass, everything will move and transform. So once you will have the perfect conditions, you'd rather be fit, because then you're going to be ready to actually, you know, surf the wave or find the right conditions, and you can grow faster. So I think, you know, having a purpose-driven organization or an impact organization, I think has a longer runway maybe. And this is the reason why I think so, is because catering to social problems means sometimes really also being locally rooted. So gaining scale in a human is sometimes more difficult, you know, attracting the right capital that actually understands that there will be more patience needed because it's new. All new innovations take longer to actually take off. And so I think in the long run, if you're patient and if you're in the long game, then I think definitely you will be eventually more successful. But I think it is required that you actually have this patience, because it takes longer for you to figure to work with social solutions or even environmental solutions. It takes innovation, and innovation takes time and more money, you know. But if you want to make money, just open a bookstore and create a franchise, and then you're going to be more successful. Definitely, maybe, right? I think in the short run. So I think, you know, I don't think they're going to be more or less successful. I'm not sure that's the question, at least that I think. For me, the question is, are you going to be able in the long run sustain why you came here, really create a solution that really that is a true solution? And are you going to be able to actually survive to the point that when you're actually ready to make a business, that you're there still? So I think, yes, social driven purposes have the chance, because investors are way more patient, because they came into the conversation with you because of who you are and what you stand for. Your key audience will be maybe more engaged in working with you together, create solutions together, to share intelligence, share information, be sort of an advocate of what you want, and be really more open to actually spend time with you. And I think something very, very important, I think your team, and it doesn't matter whether it's a 5 people organization or a 200, will be more engaged. I can definitely guarantee you that, because even though not everyone is socially driven, at the end of the day, we all have families. We all care about our parents. We all care about our kids, and our environments are impacted by the problems that we live in. So at some point, even though if I'm not a social entrepreneur, I will start caring. And if in an organization that somehow at some point cares about what I care about, then I'm absolutely committed to make this work. And I think that's why there's a bigger chance in the long run to be more successful.
Brilliant, thank you. And some of the stats really bear this out. Some of the stats on turnover and profit really bear this out. So Vevi, what's your take on this? What are businesses with purpose more successful?
I think it's swings and roundabouts. I actually agree with everything everybody said about, you know, the younger generation more care about it more. There's a more patience needed, but I think that we have to be aware of the downsides as well. There are certain things I think that are fairly common or very common in social sector businesses. I know one business, for example, that was seeking investment and ended up hiding that they were a social enterprise because they found that social investors wanted, the way the entrepreneur put it to me is, mainstream investors just want to know they're getting a financial return on their investment. Social sector investors also want to know what you're spending the money on, down to every single coffee cup. So he went to mainstream investors, and then mainstream investors are going, yeah, but you're like a charity, so you're not really going to make money. So he hid that it was in his company documents, but he basically went out and did it on a commercial basis, knowing full well that he was motivated by the social purpose. And it's perverse. I hear stories like that too often, and it's a shame, because you can have both. That's what this whole session is about. But we know that the world hasn't completely understood that. I think also one of the other things is that sometimes when you're looking, some businesses are small and want to stay small, and that's great. Hyper local, community based, all of those things are really fantastic. But there are some businesses that want to scale, and sometimes some social businesses find it more difficult because of the way they do it. So for example, I know a business selling tea who employs refugees. And normally when you reach a certain size and you want to start selling to supermarkets and so on, you basically contract your making of your tea bags to a factory. And, you know, you keep your brand and you grow, and easy peasy, well, not easy, but easier. Because he's making it himself, employing particular people, there's a lot of manual stuff there. All of that, I'll just contract it out, and suddenly I can go from selling, you know, to 20 small shops to selling to Tesco's. It's not as simple as that. So there are some fundamental challenges inherent in the way that you might choose to run your business, which just makes it different. And I think the third thing is that even though we've all been saying there's nothing wrong with profit, there's nothing wrong with profit, I know that a lot of social entrepreneurs do find the topic of money very personally awkward, and they feel bad about it in some way. And the number of social entrepreneurs I know who don't pay themselves well enough, if at all. And fundamentally, I'm always like, you're not running a sustainable business if you're not paying yourself. You have to pay yourself, but you can't grow, you can't live. And what it means is that social enterprise becomes an activity for people who've got some other form of income.
The wealthy, yeah.
And that's just wrong. We have to build business models that work for everyone. So there are some downsides, and I think people thinking about what their relationship with money is really worthwhile doing. Swings and roundabouts, but I do agree with Pablo that it's a long game. If you find the right investors who get that you can have both, who are in it for the purpose as well as you, and so on, you can do amazing things.
Brilliant. Oh, great answers, all of you. And it's made me think of something else. So the whole idea of scaling something with a strong purpose, that's really tricky. And we've seen this recently with Oatly and their investment from BlackRock. And they've taken so much criticism for it. And I don't really, I mean, you can talk about Oatly if you want, but that's not where I'm headed. How do you take investment? How do you get to the next level do you cease to be a business with purpose when that happens? And we'll start first with Fiona.
Do you cease to be? I don't think you have to, but I think it's really complicated. And I think one of the reasons it's complicated at the moment is because we have these kind of silos in the way we look at business. So I don't think we're just talking about social entrepreneurs at the moment. And I don't think that we're just talking about kind of conventional investors. I think, you know, we're talking about sort of businesses broadly that can do good and don't have to be a social enterprise to have a sense of purpose. And I think we're also looking at, you know, other types of fund. I mean, some of the work that we're doing in Liverpool is around funding specifically for the social sector, but it takes into account things like social value as part of your return in terms of like the money that they invest and that sort of thing. It's a really new thing, you know, it kind of involves some of the things that Pablo was talking there about, kind of a more patient style of capital. But I think that will help, because I think, you know, obviously, you know, BlackRock have taken this decision and they're going to be investing more in ethical businesses because they know that that's the future and it's going to make them a good return. So ultimately, you know, the maths stacks up for them, which suggests that there is something in all of this stuff. But at the same time, they're still bringing quite a kind of conventional investment model to it. And, you know, as you say, Oatly have had a huge backlash. You know, you've seen other businesses like, you know, Innocent and people like that in the past who have really struggled with this sense of growth. I mean, even Iceland, you know, when they sold the business and then the family bought it back, it's the same thing over and over again. I think those things are starting to change. I think, you know, it's kind of a sort of, it's a really personal decision when it comes to that stage. But I think, you know, if the fact that people like BlackRock and, you know, big pension funds like Nest are putting all of their money into kind of, or they know that the sectors that are performing well are the ethical investment sectors, I think that means that it can usher in a really positive future for investments in purpose-led businesses. But I totally, you know, accept and admit that it's probably a bit of a kind of a potential like parting of directions at the moment for a lot of businesses.
Super challenging, and we've only got 2 minutes left, so I'll do a really quick round robin on the same question. How do you scale? How do you take funding? We'll go to Pablo first, but real fast, guys.
Definitely important that the mainstream comes into the conversation. I'm not saying they're going to do it perfect. They have to learn, but I think they're key. They're systemically important. Otherwise, the whole continuity of capital will exclude purpose-driven business, and that's not good for anyone. So there's a learning curve from both sides. I think, how do you scale and how do you also become an investor in such a business? I think the question, how you scale, I think it requires a long answer. But it's definitely making sure that you don't run out of capital, making sure that you have lined up a vision, a pathway of when you need what kind of capital. The need of capital will change from angels to more venture capital, maybe private equity in the future, or maybe even being bought and so on. So if you don't be innocent around growing. Growing can be very, very painful if you have not actually even considered it and you haven't planned for it. So create your legal, your fiscal, the whole business administration 101 needs to be a part of your social business. Don't take it away, include it, integrate it. Brilliant, thank you. And then Vivi?
I completely agree with everything Pablo just said, and actually Fiona as well. I would add to that, there are other ways of scaling social business, which is, as well as growing a business, you can also multiply your business either through a licensing or franchising model or through some sort of open sourcing and sharing. And that is also a way of scaling the methodology and things that work, but keeping them all hyperlocal. And I think that's also one way of doing things, which is kind of exciting in the social sector.
Brilliant, thank you. And just to finish off, Katerina?
I also do believe in the power of partnerships when it comes to scaling. If a social business partners with a large business, that is trying to lead with social purpose, to install some social purpose in its business model. I think such kind of partnerships can be a great way of scaling. And then it is scaling of the product, and also it's scaling of sustainable practices from the social entrepreneur to the business as well. So it's scaling in many ways.
Brilliant. Thank you. Scaling good is always better than just scaling. Thank you all so very, very much. I'm sorry we rushed that last bit, but I wanted to include you all. Look, the way I look at these things is purpose is the way that you attract the best talent in the world. It's quite clearly a big opportunity in terms of growth. And to be fair, it's probably the way that we attract the best customers as well. So I think it's the way forward. Thank you all for all of the work that you do. And also thank you for the time that you spent with me today. We'll be back in a frighteningly short amount of time, 9 minutes, for the last session, which is capitalism after COVID, because you should never waste a crisis. So thank you all for watching. You're more than welcome back in 10 minutes. Thank you for being part for the participants. I appreciate that. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Enjoyed that.